Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards, with your host, Mel Blackmore.
Hi and welcome to the ISO Show. Today I'm going to be explaining about the world-leading methodology to implement any ISO standard. It's what we affectionately call isology. So isology is the 7-step approach to successfully achieve certification to any ISO standard. And I know I'm saying that with confidence, so that's because we've been doing this for the last 18 years. We've had hundreds of organisations that have gone through this process successfully, and it's been refined and refined and refined because we're all about continual improvement. We do practice what we preach. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. So I'm going to be talking about isology and our 7 steps. So isology was founded by Blackmores. And for those of you that don't know, that are new to the ISO show, I'm Mel Blackmore and I'm the founder of Blackmores and isology. But isology isn't just from me. It's been created by a team of consultants that have worked here at Blackmores over the years, and it's been built on best practice. Now, the first thing that we do is look at planning. Planning is so important because we need to understand what the scope of your certification is. What are the timescales that we're looking at as well? And typically we'd be looking at 6 months for the implementation, and I'll explain later on how that's broken down. We also talk about the resources that might be available at the planning stage. So this could be, let's say if it's the environmental standard, who are going to be your environmental champions? If it's information security, ideally we need to have a representative from the IT department. It could also be a representative from office management, so that could be a facilities management representative, or it could be an internal office manager because we need to look at physical security, and then also commercial as well as HR, because whenever there's information involved, it's generally humans as well that are responsible for the errors that happen. And quite often that's the most common area of risk when it comes to people. So at this planning stage, we're identifying what those key resources are. And also we need to understand that we have got leadership commitment. The other thing that we talk about in the planning stage is your certification body. So we would only ever recommend going for an accredited certification. So that's where, let's say if it's in the UK, you've got the Crown and Tick. The accreditation body in the UK is called UCAS, United Kingdom Accreditation Service. And then they accredit in excess of 30 certification bodies. And those certification bodies are listed on the UCAS website. But I know we have a lot of international listeners, so all you need to do is find out your country's accreditation body and the certification bodies. They can legitimately offer certification. So at that planning stage, this is the platform in order to be able to then move into the project itself. So number 2 is discover. So at the discovery stage, this is where we take a deep dive to unpack what you've actually got within your organisation and how your activities are aligned with the relevant ISO standard. So this would involve an initial meeting with the leadership team typically, and then what we would go into are specific questions in relation to the standard. So let's say if it's an environmental standard, do you have an environmental policy? Do you have environmental objectives? Do you understand what your environmental footprint is? But we break it down step by step, and in some cases, you may have a documented policy or procedure. Fantastic. We'll take a note of that. And there may be certain scenarios where you have got procedures, but they're informal. They're not actually documented as such. And that's fine too. We want to make a note of all of those areas. You might also have initiatives that you're involved with when it comes to environmental management. So we're going to be capturing all of this in the gap analysis, which will clearly deduce where you're currently compliant to the standard and where you're not. that helps us to then create an action plan with who is doing what, where, when and how. Simple as that. So that in effect provides the catalyst that we need to move into the stage for the development of your ISO management system. Now, before we can actually create the documentation for you, we have to go through a stage that we call expose. Okay, so expose is the third stage. And there is a requirement across all ISO standards to cover something called context of the organisation. So what is that? Well, ultimately, this is about understanding what your opportunities and risks are and who your interested parties are as well. So we go through a process called a SWOT and a PESTLE. So that's a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And PESTLE enables us to look at the external influencing factors such as political, environmental, economic, social, technological and legal, and also ethical as well now. So that helps us to be able to understand where the risks are from an external point of view, but also where your strengths are as an organisation too. As I mentioned earlier about interested parties, so we need to understand who those key interested parties are. So obviously we've got clients, you may have subcontractors, regulatory bodies. All of those will have some type of communication flow with you, and it's important that we take all of those things into consideration. The output of this exercise can be creating a risk register and also objectives for the business, regardless of which standard it is. So that certain standards don't always ask you to have a risk register, but we know that this is something that's really beneficial and the assessors absolutely love this. For certain standards, you will need to have a risk register. And this is where if we are looking at other controls that we need to have in order to be able to address risks, like the legal aspects. So all organisations need to understand what the applicable statutory, regulatory and contractual requirements are. So we can help to expose that information, and in certain standards like health and safety and environmental management, it is a key requirement of those standards. So now that we've completed the expose stage, we understand where the opportunities are within the business and what we need to address. That's when we can actually start creating the management system. So this is stage 4 out of the 7. So this is where we can create all the mandatory requirements and also all the other requirements that you would like to stipulate that is best practice in your organisation. So let's say if it's the quality standard ISO 9001, that could be having a quality policy statement in place. But that doesn't mean to say that you can't have other policy statements that are important to your business. So that could be equality and diversity, it could be information security. That's entirely up to you. But obviously we do highlight which are the minimum requirements for those standards that you're implementing, because they're the core essentials and what needs to be created, and we want to make sure that everything is completed in accordance with the standard. Now, in terms of the creation of this documentation, you may already have a lot of it in place, which is fantastic, and we will just update or integrate any other requirements within that. In many cases, your processes are driven through software and applications, and let's say at Blackmores, for example, we use Monday.com extensively, not just for project management, but absolutely everything. Logging holiday requests, right through to logging a cancelled day, absolutely everything. And we've actually got Loom videos to explain what that process is and how to complete those activities within Monday.com. So don't think that you have to have a manual. Long gone are the days where you have to have, let's say, a quality manual. More often, it's about what's working well within your business, which could be on an intranet, SharePoint site, Microsoft 365, in order to be able to capture how you operate, in order to be able to make it as accessible as possible. So either way, we want to keep it as simple as possible as well. Okay, so accessibility and simplicity are key to the success of creating an effective and impactful ISO management system. So once that management system has been created and approved, we then move on to the exciting stage of the launch. So launch is stage 5. This is where we will help to create a communications plan to effectively communicate the launch of your management system, both internally and externally. Why is that so critical? Well, there isn't much point in having controls that your business needs, that you've identified as massive opportunities, if nobody is aware of them. You're really missing out. You're missing out on an opportunity to create additional value within your organisation. So this is definitely something to be embraced, and this is something that we can provide support with. Now, our support comes in 2 ways. One is through an awareness course on your management system that we could run either in person or via Teams. It's then recorded and it can be used for future inductions. And the second way, and this is very complementary to those initial awareness sessions, is the isology hub. So the isology hub is the world-leading go-to place to get access to all of your resources to learn about ISO standards. So let's say the project is ISO 14001. Isology Hub will enable you to understand what an environmental management system is, what ISO 14001 is, how to find environmental champions and manage their responsibilities, how to understand what your legal compliance requirements are. So this explains so much more. And so it's definitely a valuable exercise to ensure that your employees are competent and aware of whatever it is that you're looking to change within the organisation. Then moving on to the last 2 stages, engage is the 6th step. So this is where, after the launch, you want to ensure that employees are fully engaged and they actually not only are aware of the policies and procedures that you've got in place, but they're actively using them. And the only way to be able to verify that this is actually happening is for us to be able to carry out internal audits. And this isn't something that we're saying that you have to do. It's actually a mandatory requirement for the leading ISO standards. So we'll provide an audit schedule and also we'll carry out the internal audit reports to support your compliance journey. So this is where we can basically do a bit of a dummy run of your assessment when the certification body comes in. So we'll be asking various questions, which are basically like show and tell, in order to be able to capture the evidence of compliance through the internal audits. So let's say if you've got a training and competency procedure, the evidence there would be training records, and that's one example. If you say that you've got objectives for the business, you need to show them and show your progress that you've made against them in terms of achievement. So it's all about looking at the performance of the business and the effectiveness of your policies and procedures that have been implemented. And ultimately that helps to demonstrate the value as well. Last but not least, step 7 is review. So we've created and launched and got engagement in relation to your ISO management system. And we need to be able to review that. So we will basically facilitate a management review. And typically that's a meeting. It doesn't always have to be that way. There are lots of different ways to do a management review. And in fact, we've done podcasts on this in the past and the different ways to do it. But ultimately, we're collating data on the performance of the business in relation to that standard. So let's say if it's business continuity management, we would be looking at the results of business continuity tests and also results of internal audits, any regulatory requirements in relation to that, and ultimately the minutes of that meeting are then recorded. Why is that important? Well, number 1, it's a mandatory requirement of the ISO standards, and number 2, the the assessor will expect to see that when they come in to do the assessment. So ultimately what we're doing is creating a portfolio of evidence ready for that assessment. And also after the assessment, you've got a mechanism for scalability for your organisation and to improve quality, sustainability and risk. And all of this is done in preparation for the stage 1 assessment and the stage 2 assessment. And more information on what's involved with an assessment is actually available in a previous podcast that we've done. So if you'd like to find out more about the isology process, then please do get in contact with us. So you can do that at www.blackmoresuk.com. Or if you can't wait for somebody to come in to help you to do it and you want to do it yourself, then you just need to join as a member to the Isology Hub and you'll get access to all of those resources. So thank you very much for listening. If you found this useful, please do leave us with a comment. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any future opportunities to listen to the ISO show. Thanks for listening.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.